Hello, I'm Abby Hathorn. This program is a presentation of the Communications Department of Northeast State Community College. The Tennessee Promise is a scholarship which provides high school graduates the opportunity to attend a 2-year college free of tuition and fees. It is both a scholarship and mentoring program which will cover tuition and fees not covered by the Pell Grant, the Hope Scholarship, or TSAA funds. In this episode of Direction Northeast, we'll look at the process of the Tennessee Promise and how it impacts prospective students. Join us with our guest, Josh Johnson, after this.
My name is Anthony Adams, and I'm IT support specialist at Northeast State Community College, which is also where I got my start. If I could offer any advice to anyone out there that's looking to pursue their education, my advice to you is just do it. Once you talk to someone here, you will see how easy it is to communicate with the employees here, and they're very willing and helpful to get you on your way to pursue your career.
Our guest today is Josh Johnson, Coordinator of County and State Scholarships for Northeast State, who assists students with the identification of college and community resources that meet their current and emerging needs. Hey Josh, welcome to Direction Northeast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
The first thing I'd like to start out with asking is, what is Tennessee Promise for those who don't understand that?
Well, Tennessee Promise is a last dollar tuition assistance program. So we have a lot of students in our area that are in need of tuition assistance. So that's kind of a given. After the federal Pell Grant is taken into account, the Hope Scholarship funds, and of course any other form of state aid, the Promise Scholarship comes in and helps pay that last dollar tuition for those students. It's also heavy on community service and of course the mentoring component for the program. But what it is ultimately is it's an opportunity for these students to come to school and graduate and basically reach a goal that a lot of them didn't think was within their reach.
Now, who qualifies for the Tennessee Promise Scholarship?
Well, any Tennessee high school graduate, HiSET graduate, or GED candidate actually is eligible for the Tennessee Promise Scholarship itself. So every student must apply during what would be their senior year of high school, especially if they're a homeschool student. We want to make sure that we reach out to those folks as well. But they're all eligible. So as long as you were a class of 2015 or beyond, you were eligible to apply. Now they must apply during their senior year of high school, of course, and meet several deadlines. But as long as they maintain those deadlines, then they will maintain their eligibility for the scholarship.
Now, who does the Tennessee Promise Scholarship typically benefit, like your socioeconomic classes or groups of people?
Well, basically, it's going to impact those students that are in those gray areas. So typically, you're going to see most of our students receive some form of federal and state aid. So things like the federal Pell Grant, they're going to receive those funds. If those students are full federal Pell students, they won't receive funding from the Promise program, but they will remain an eligible Promise student, as long as they keep up with the dates and deadlines, of course. Really, the students that it's going to impact are those where the federal government is saying, well, you make just too much money, basically, to receive the federal Pell Grant, but not so much that you're not going to receive some sort of aid. So there's that gray area there. Most of the Promise students that we have right now that are receiving funding are getting a little bit of Pell Grant money, but mostly they're getting that money paid for by the Hope Scholarship. So that's a $1,500 award. That leaves just a few $100s that our students are receiving for Promise. The average payment right now on Promise is about $1,028.
Now, what are the general requirements for a student to be able to have the Tennessee Promise Scholarship?
So a couple things they'll have to do during their senior year of high school. So the application process will typically end around the 1st of November. So students apply during their senior year of high school. They'll have 2 team meetings they'll have to attend in the spring. Of course, they'll all have to do their FAFSA. So that's the free application for federal student aid. That is always going to be a February 15th deadline, hard and fast. And then during the summer, they'll need to make sure that they complete the application process, just like any other student would have for college. And then by August 1, they have to turn in that first round of community service. So that's 8 hours they have to turn in.
Now, what happens if a student doesn't do one or more of these things?
Unfortunately, they'll be declared ineligible for that semester and any subsequent semester. And that's really my job, and our goal here at Northeast State is to keep those students eligible for the program.
Now, if a student, say you have this community service that they have to do 8 hours per semester, how does that work?
Well, with the 8 hours of community service, that's not something that we typically deal with in our office. But that's not to say that we just say, okay, well, that's Tennessee Achieves' job. Tennessee Achieves is our partnering organization, and every community college and Tennessee College of Applied Technology in the state has a partnering organization that is kind of the go-between between the college and the state. So they handle the mentoring aspect of the Tennessee Promise program as well as that community service component. So really what we do is we try to provide opportunities in the area for our students to complete those required hours. So we've compiled a pretty concise list of all the cities in our area, the major organizations for those students to connect with them and to get those hours done. So we're not necessarily the reporting agent or who they report to for that program, but we're definitely there to help guide them along the process.
Is there a minimum GPA requirement for students to apply for Tennessee Promise or to even keep the Tennessee Promise once they have already received it?
There's no GPA to get into the program. If the student has graduated from a Tennessee area high school, homeschool, GED, or HiSET program, then they're eligible to apply and receive the Promise funds. The only students that would be ineligible is once they are actually on our college campus, like the roughly 1,100 students we have now. They must maintain a 2.0 GPA. So at the end of the academic year, if that GPA is below a 2.0, they will lose their Promise scholarship.
Now, is the Tennessee Promise a statewide scholarship or is it just a county area scholarship?
It is a statewide program, absolutely. So basically what the state did, Governor Haslam's goal here is the Drive to 55 initiative. So what we're aiming for is 55% of Tennessee graduates or Tennessee residents to have a degree or certificate by 2025. So that's a lofty goal. So looking at that, they said, what program can we build to basically achieve that goal? We had a program in this area called Educate and Grow Scholarship Program. That was a last dollar scholarship. It didn't have a community service component, but there was a little bit of a mentoring component to that in Tennessee Achieves. So really what they did was they expanded upon that program and took some reserves from the lottery fund, and that's how they built the Promise Scholarship.
Now, where does the money come from to give these students the money for the 5 semesters of Tennessee Promise?
So those excess lottery funds that they've taken, they put that money into a fund, and that's basically growing. That growth is really what is funding the Tennessee Promise Scholarship Program. Now, we actually did fund less from the Tennessee Promise than the governor had expected to. And really what ended up happening was after federal Pell Grant was taken into account, after all those students that earned that lottery scholarship, which isn't, that's no small feat in itself. Students had to have a 3.0 or a 21 on their ACT coming out of high school to get that $1,500 in assistance that was already there for the state. So all that left typically for our students was around $1,028. So the state was not putting out as much money as they thought they were.
Now, are students allowed to use the Tennessee Promise at 4-year colleges or universities, or is it specifically for community colleges or 2-year tech programs?
Well, students can absolutely use those funds at any one of the 13 community colleges in the state of Tennessee, any one of the 7 Tennessee colleges of applied technology, or there are several 4-year institutions that students can use the Promise at, and they can transfer to and from institutions as long as they maintain eligibility for the program. The only catch with those 4-year schools would be that 4-year school must have an associate's degree program, and the student must maintain enrollment within that program in order to stay Promise eligible. But the state will not fund anything over the regular community college rate or the average rate at that school. So let's use Austin Peay as an example. Students can go to Austin Peay and get involved in their, they have 2 associate's degree programs as of right now, I believe, and they can take part in those programs. But they only fund tuition up to about $2,100 right now. So that's still going to leave some gap funding of roughly $2,000 for that student to pay out of pocket, even though they're a Promise.
So there is a maximum amount of money that Tennessee Promise is willing to contribute to students?
Yes, and that maximum award right now is sitting just above $2,100. Now, of course, that'll increase as tuition rates increase in the state. So really what our goal is to make sure that we're funding full-time tuition for these students. $2,100 here at this campus will cover anywhere from 18 to 19 credit hours of tuition.
That's wonderful. Now, also at Northeast State, how many students approximately would you say are Tennessee Promise recipients?
Approximately, I would say 1,063 right now. We stay up to date on that, clearly. Every day I have a conversation, have a counterpart in the financial aid office. Her name is Holly Malone. She's fantastic at what she does. She deals with all the certification and awarding process involved in Promise, and I try to deal with the day-to-day tracking of not only the numbers, but the students and their eligibility and the programs we need to provide to them to stay eligible. So of those 1,063, we had roughly 600 students that actually received some Promise payment. Now the other ones, the close to 500 students, are still Promise eligible. but they're not receiving a payment because they have other aid paying for their tuition. But our goal is also to keep those students eligible because this is a safety net. As we spoke about earlier, the GPA for Hope is a 2.75, with the GPA for Promise being a 2.0. So there's a gap there. If a student falls below that one for lottery, they may lose their lottery, but still get caught by Promise, and that'll help pay that tuition.
Now, why 8 hours of community service? In my opinion, that seems a little bit small for someone to get a free semester of school. Does that really kind of work more so with how the student's workload goes, or was that just a statewide decision?
That's going to have a lot to do with it. It was a statewide decision, but as I spoke of earlier, the Educate and Grow Scholarship program that we had in this area that was a county program started in 2001 by Sullivan County. They're fantastic group of folks over there. They did a great job giving us $200,000 for that program, and every year we impacted hundreds of students. And Tennessee Achieves built their program off of that model and added in the community service. Well, that community service within that program was 8 hours and has always been, so that was kind of the building block. Realistically, what that works out to be for students in a semester, that's roughly a half an hour a week of community service that they can do. Or, they can lock it up in about the first 8 weeks and do an hour, however they want to divide that. But realistically, we think that is, I would say it's probably a little bit low. I did a lot more of that when I was younger. It really depends on how involved you get in that community. But realistically, a lot of students don't realize they're doing community service each and every day. They just don't think about it. So now it's just getting them to realize, hey, we're going to give you credit for that work that you're doing in the community. You figure we just took students, about 1,100 of them, on this campus right now, and we put in over 8,000 hours of community service right back in this area. So that's a fantastic aspect of this program.
Oh, absolutely. Now, if a student's GPA drops below that 2.0, do they lose the Tennessee Promise scholarship, or are they just put on probation of sorts?
This is basically the way it's going to work right now. A lot of this we're still working out. We're in the first year of the program, let's just be honest about that. At the end of this academic year, which will be in May, we're going to send all of that information about all of our students out to the state level, and they're going to look at the GPAs. If the overall GPA for the student is not a 2.0 or above, they will be declared ineligible for the Promise, for the future on. There is an appeals process that will be in place, just like there is for the Hope Scholarship. But I will tell you that without some kind of medical designation or military designation, it's going to be quite difficult for that student to get that scholarship back. So they may maintain lottery funds and they may receive that back, but Promise is going to be a difficult one to get back, I promise you.
Now, will those students have to go back and pay for the semesters that they had taken and used for the Tennessee Promise, or will that just kind of get pushed to the side?
Not necessarily. That determination has not been made, but I will say the state is not in a, basically we're not in a position where they're going to come back and they're going to go after a student to try and get them to pay funds back. Our goal is to get the students to complete and to graduate. So if anything, we'd like to know what impacted the student, what affected that decision that had to be made for that student, or what was going on in their life, and how can we help them and set them up for success.
Now, with the Tennessee Promise, there's also a mentoring program, I know, at Northeast State Community College, but is there also mentoring programs at other colleges that also have Tennessee Promise students?
A lot of students right now, or a lot of different colleges are kind of testing out different programs. So here on this campus, Jane Honeycutt, who is the advisor for the honors program, she's piloting a peer-to-peer mentoring program along with those Tennessee Promise students. So she has roughly 50 mentors right now that are taking part in that program. They're mentoring several students, and we've seen great results from that program. Those students have been fantastic. The mentors do a wonderful job of coming by my office and talking to me about different issues and things that can communicate with those students. And we could hope for nothing more than that, to be honest. Talking to the other institutions, they are doing very similar programs. Some of them do a bit more. Pellissippi State has been part of that Tennessee Achieves program for many years. So they have had close to 800 students on their campus for several years. So they're very familiar with this. So we're trying to learn from them as well. But I will say that Northeast State has been lauded by the governor's office, kind of singled out for the efforts that we've made on behalf of the Promise program, and our campus has been a huge success.
Now, do you have a hard time getting mentors for that program?
No, I think the hardest part is communication. I think that there are people in the community that want to take part, but it's just getting them the right information, answering those questions for them, and basically showing them how to sign up. Our mentor goal for this year was 500 for our area, and we surpassed that, I'm happy to say. We were making a last-minute push there, but realistically, a week before the deadline, we were only short about 12 mentors. So I think we did a fantastic job here, and I really appreciate the faculty and staff at Northeast State for jumping on board and supporting the students.
Now, does every Tennessee Promise recipient have to have a mentor, or is that something that just sort of helps them along with the new college experience?
Every Tennessee Promise student will be paired with a mentor. The only adjustment that they're making for the second year of the program, or cohort 2 over the first year, is the fact that these students will be paired after their first team meeting. So basically, the mentors now are going to get more of the students that are actually going to attend that community college campus or TCAT, so they're going to have that opportunity to connect with those students. And realistically, what the mentor is doing is just guiding the student through that college process. A lot of these students are not aware of what the transition is going to be from high school to college. So that's a big jump to make, and the mentors are there to help them out.
Are Tennessee Promise recipients who are majoring in a specific field paired with mentors that are also majoring in that specific field?
Not necessarily. This first year, I think they experimented a little bit with if it was a male mentor, trying to keep them with a male student. There was a lot of that. Depending on the service area, we try to do that. They try to do that as much as possible, but not necessarily major specific, to be honest, because you never know what the student's going to need. They could need some question answer within their major, or they could need something a little more personal, talk about the issues that are going on at home, or just a shoulder to lean on.
Now, do students, how many required meetings a year do they have to attend?
Right now it is 2 in the spring. So in their first, let's just say it was a senior in high school, they're going to attend their first 2 meetings in the spring, and they will attend a follow-up meeting that will be in the first fall semester. So they've got them in the middle of their first semester on the college campus. They want an update from the student. They want to know what's working, what's not, and how they can help.
Also, how does that affect their scholarship money throughout the semester? If they don't attend a meeting, do they have to make that up, or does it cause problems for them later on?
For seniors in high school, it's a little bit easier. If they miss their first meeting, they may be able to attend a backup meeting. Now, the only trouble is last year's meeting, the backup was actually in Knoxville. So if a student in our area, let's say it was a Sullivan Central graduate, and they missed their Sullivan Central meeting, that's where their first team meeting will be. It'll be back at their high school because it's very convenient for them. If they miss that meeting for some reason, they have to drive all the way to Knoxville to make that meeting, or they'll be declared ineligible.
Now, on this campus in particular, if they miss one of those meetings, does it affect their Tennessee Promise money that they're getting, or is it just something that they have to meet up with their mentor later to discuss?
It absolutely could affect their promise going forward. It depends on the restrictions and if they change the program in the future, but as of right now, a missed meeting is considered a terminating event. So that would terminate that scholarship opportunity for that student.
Now, on the subject of the community service, you talk about how students obviously have to participate in things locally, but are there specific organizations that Tennessee Promise requires students to be associated with, or can they volunteer wherever their heart desires?
It's pretty wide open, to be honest. Student doesn't just have to perform community service, they could also do job shadowing. So granted, we put together a pretty concise list of those community service opportunities here. Things like Second Harvest Food Bank. We had Project Thanksgiving going on last week. That was a fantastic event. Crop drops in the area that are going on where they're repackaging green beans. There were a couple thousand pounds of those done over here last year as part of that program. Those opportunities are always going to be there for the student. But what I'd like to convey to them is that job shadowing opportunity. You know, it's great to get that community service out there, but for these students, if we truly want them to succeed, it's good for them to connect with someone that's going to be in their field and may help them guide them along their path.
Do you think there's a particular reason why they don't emphasize on the job shadowing opportunity versus the volunteer hours?
I think it's mentioned the same, but I think students misunderstand the job shadowing and they're very familiar with community service. One of our counties I'd like to highlight in the area that does a great job of that community service is Washington County. Let's use Science Hill, for example. Those students are required to perform community service while they're in their senior year of high school, actually throughout their high school career. So if our other counties jumped on board with that, that would make that first year of community service much easier for those Promise students. So Science Hill graduates last year could take 8 of those hours that they completed during their senior year and submit those for Promise. So they were already complete with those hours.
Now, for a scholarship program that has so many pros, yes, you're in your first year, and obviously there's going to be some bumps in the road as you're figuring things out. What are some of the downsides to Tennessee Promise?
I would say the downside right now is just the size of the program itself. And the fact that we have the state with their portion of the program, Tennessee Achieves with their portion of the program, and then you have a college. So anytime you've got those three, and then you throw in mentors and students, there's a lot of opportunity for miscommunication. So our goal here, and my goal when I took over this position, was to streamline the lines of communication, the information that was coming into us from all those different entities, and how can I effectively get that out to the students. Communication is usually where programs err anytime you deal with anything like this, but for us, I think we've done a great opportunity of reining all of that information in and effectively delivering it to the students.
And now, in your opinion, what changes could be made to the Tennessee Promise in the future to make it more efficient and make it better for students and mentors and everybody that's involved?
I'm going to hit on that communication again. The earlier the better. The quicker we get updates and any information that's going to change from the state, and I understand they're in the first year, we're having some growing pains we're dealing with the program. The colleges are kind of finding their ways. But we have met as a group of community colleges and TCATs, and we do conference calls quite regularly, usually 1 or 2 during the semester. And we talk about those little hiccups and how we can help each other. Hey, what are you doing great at Pellissippi? And this is what we're doing at Northeast State. And we can kind of pair because our goals are the same. The goal is to get these students to graduation. So with us, as long as we keep the lines of communication open between the different entities, we'll be okay going forward. I think a few of the changes I'd like to see is just being a more effective communicator to these students. That state, if they're going to make a change or they're going to do something that impacts these students that are in Promise, they've made an agreement or entered into a contract with them. So now it's on them as well to make sure that they hold up their end of the bargain. The student is being hammered with dates and deadlines. There's no joke about that. This program is very deadline heavy. So the state just needs to make sure that they're an effective communicator.
With it being so deadline heavy, are there particular parts of those requirements that kids often seem to miss more than others?
The first year of the program, I think the one that we ran into and we really had a concern with, I know in March and April I was kind of barking to the state about and really being an advocate for the student. We have 2 deadlines that landed on the same day. We had the verification deadline for financial aid, which is a huge one because that doesn't just impact the student, that also impacts the student's family. Having to get things like tax documentation, stuff like that, that's not easy. Dealing with the IRS is not easy. So we had that deadline was the same day as the first community service deadline. And as I told the state several times and talked to the governor specifically about it, I said that is a barrier to education right there. If our goal is to get them to graduate, let's not make it so deadline heavy and let's not double up on those and make it harder on the student.
Now, do you think that other states should have things like the Tennessee Promise and to be able to help students actually get to that graduation point?
Absolutely. Funding is always going to be the question at the state and federal level. How do we back programs? It's awesome to have great ideas, but if you can't get the funding for the program, it's really hard to get it off the ground. We were lucky enough, the state, to have those lottery funds to be able to use as a jumping off point, and I think that's going to be a very successful future for this program. We are already getting contacted by Michigan, state of Michigan. I was actually on the phone with several of their leaders the other day talking about Tennessee Promise program, what's worked and what hasn't. We've talked with CNN and NBC News about how that's working in this area, and to have Northeast State on their map is fantastic. Before the city of Akron and LeBron James rolled out his program that's very similar to Promise, we were communicating via email with all the data that I had received and the communication I had for students about the successes of the program. So I didn't get a shout out from LeBron on that, but it's a successful program that we want to see used statewide.
Do you feel like the funding of Tennessee Promise will naturally increase as it progresses, or do you think that's going to be more so based on the statistics of students' success?
It's going to have to increase. And the reason being is that tuition increases. We're all well aware of that. If you've been on this campus for a couple of years, I guarantee you've seen a tuition increase. It happens. And some of that comes with if the school increases or decreases funding, it's going to impact all of the services that we provide. So for this program, it is set up, that fund, to grow and effectively maintain those scholarships for those students. So tuition, I hope that in 10 years it wouldn't be double what it is now, but if that is the case, I think this program is set up to be able to fund it.
Now, with a student who is, obviously we talked about this earlier, receiving other scholarships, what if those scholarships are not federally funded? Are they still eligible to have Tennessee Promise as that sort of backup plan?
So the way the scholarships are laid out, if I'm hearing your question correctly, after the lottery pays and after the state pays, then Promise will come in if they're an eligible student. Now let's say that you are receiving a scholarship from our Office of Scholarship Programs. That's a foundation scholarship. So that doesn't impact you for Promise at all. Basically, it's like me writing you a check out of our pocket and handing it right to you, and you can do whatever you want to with it. So it's not counted against you. That was a big bonus for this program. We were very concerned when they started talking about designing this and building the framework a couple years ago, when they said, okay, your office is going to be considered gift aid in Eyes of the Promise. That was fantastic news. So for us now, our goal is to get these students, and I was just doing this a little while ago in a classroom, getting them to sign up for the general scholarship, because you and I both know that even if you're a Promise student, somebody's got to come in and pay for those textbooks, and that is a ridiculous cost right now.
Now, on my last question will be, when you're talking about, obviously there's cons to any scheme, but with this particular thing, obviously the pro would be getting to go to school for free, essentially. But what would the second best thing about the Tennessee Promise be, in your opinion?
I would say the second best thing is the amount of community service that we're putting back in this area. We're a community college, okay? And at Northeast State, I like to say we're a community within a college, so we truly care. So to see these students turning around and giving their time back to needy people in this area, Second Harvest Food Bank, I mention them quite a lot. We do a lot of work with their mobile food pantry here on this campus and on our Kingsport campus as well. Students come, they donate their time, they hand out food to students that they may not realize, sitting right across the table in a classroom from someone, that student is worried about going home and actually putting a meal together. You don't know that need is there. So for those students to get out in the community and give back, that is huge. It's a huge part of the program.
Oh, absolutely. Would you say that's one of probably the most popular volunteer ones with the Tennessee Promise?
It is, and Second Harvest for us is really beneficial because they're about 1.5 miles down the road on Airport Highway, so that's a good opportunity for us. And students in this area can really see the impact here in our region.
That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. We'll be back in just a moment to wrap up Direction Northeast.
My name is Amanda Broom. I'm a mass communications graduate. I work behind and in front of the camera, and I got my start at Northeast State. We are constantly connected to our smartphones and to the internet, and that's why mass communications in particular is incredibly important, because we need it. I belong in college because I love learning. I love meeting people, and I love discovering new things. The best part about coming here was a quality, personal education that was also affordable.
Going to college was a big decision, but when I graduate from Northeast State, I know I can have a career.
Over half of our employees are graduates of Northeast State Community College.
When we see Northeast State on an application, we always give that candidate a second look.
Our company partners with Northeast State, knowing that their students graduate as trained professionals that become our employees both today and into the future.
Discover the career opportunities that await you. Northeast State Community College.
That concludes the program for today. We have talked with our guest, Josh Johnson, and the benefits of the Tennessee Promise. Community is very important to the students at Northeast State Community College, and this program takes a look at a few of the subjects they find important. Until we meet next time, on behalf of the students, staff, and faculty of Northeast State Community College, I'm Abby Hathorn, and this is Direction Northeast.